call this hearing to conduct oversight on one of the most successful and significant public health statutes in our nation's history, the Clean Air Act. Before President Richard Nixon signed the Clean Air Act into law in 1970, the nation's air was heavily polluted in many places in our great nation. For example, a fog of pollution covered Dorona, Pennsylvania for 5 days in 1948. Records indicate that 20 people died, 6,000 people were sickened, and hundreds were evacuated as a result of the pollution. In another tragic case, the eastern United States was blanketed by harmful smog in 1966. Scientists and researchers eventually concluded the smog caused the death of 24 people per day over a period of 6 days. The Clean Air Act, which has deep bipartisan roots, changed that. President Richard Nixon said, quote, "I think that 1970 will be known as the year of the beginning, in which we really began to move on the problems of clean air for the future generations of America," unquote. When President George Bush signed the Clean Air Act amendments in 1990, he said, quote, "I take great pleasure in signing the legislation as a demonstration to the American people of my determination that each and every American shall breathe clean air." Now, 40 years after the Clean Air Act was created, many of the benefits to public health are clear and measurable. Let me show you how successful this landmark environmental law has been in protecting children and families in my state of California. In 1976, and that's the peak of the line, the red line, there were 166 days when health advisories were issued in Southern California to urge people with asthma and other people with lung sensitivities to stay indoors. In 35 years, the number of smog-related health advisories issued in Southern California dropped from 166 days in 1976 to 0 days in 2010. And I think that chart, you know, if a picture is 1,000 words, this chart says it about the Clean Air Act. Thank you. While the Clean Air Act has dramatically improved health safeguards, more work remains to be done. A 2011 report by the American Lung Association shows that 154 million people live in areas with levels of toxic soot and smog pollution that current science demonstrates is dangerous. Last year, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette reported on the oily black rain of pollution from an electric utility company that coated a local community in 2006. Because of the potential impact of the pollution on public health, local farmers were told that livestock should not graze in their fields, and families were told not to eat fruits and vegetables from their own gardens. In 2008, USA Today ran a series on toxic air pollution near our nation's schools. And I remember it was the first time I really met formally with Lisa Jackson here, as she was coming up for her confirmation hearing. I asked EPA to help monitor for such threats, and she said she pledged she would do so. And now the agency is focused on addressing sources of toxic air pollution near schools. We all know that children are much more sensitive to these dangerous pollutants than adults, given their size. The EPA is also helping my constituents in Mecca, California. Yes, there is a Mecca, California. There's a horrible odor emanating from a soil recycling plant. It made people very sick. And Senator Inhofe, as you know, sometimes we see these issues in the local press. Well, I saw it in the local press, and I looked at it, and everyone was just shrugging their shoulders. What was it? What was these kids were dizzy. They were practically fainting. Teachers were being hospitalized. It was just a nightmare. And the kids were told they couldn't go out and play, and you tell a little child they can't go out and play, that's like a prison sentence. And so we got EPA activated. They got involved with the state, with the local people, and now they have identified the source of the pollution. The point I'm making is we need to enforce this law. And under the Clean Air Act, EPA is required to strengthen protections if the science indicates that pollution adversely impacts public health, again, including children's health. And recently, EPA proposed much-needed federal safeguards to reduce toxic air pollution from old power plants by requiring the use of modern pollution controls. These proposed safeguards would reduce mercury, lead, chromium, which are known to cause cancer and birth defects. The point is, this is the Clean Air Act at work, and Administrator Jackson has to do her job unless we repeal the Clean Air Act or portions thereto, which there are some attempts to do, which have failed. Lisa Jackson has to do her job, or there'll be lawsuits and she'll have to defend why she's doing nothing. So I hope colleagues will understand that this is her responsibility. When EPA reduces toxic air pollution, it helps families and children. EPA recently conducted a congressionally required peer-reviewed analysis of the Clean Air Act, showing overwhelming health benefits now and into the future. The annual benefits by 2020, and I'll show you this, it's a little small printing, but I think colleagues can read it, will include preventing more than 230,000 premature deaths, 200,000 cases of heart attacks, 2.4 million cases of asthma attacks, 120,000 emergency room visits, and 5.4 million lost days of school. So, thank you. In contrast to the unsupported claims by some polluters who argue health threats from mercury are exaggerated and other air pollutants are exaggerated, we'll hear today from Administrator Jackson and representatives of the American Academy of Pediatrics, the nurses, the Thoracic Society, who are experts on this issue. And these witnesses will describe the critical steps that have been taken to reduce dangerous air pollution. Again, before I turn to Ranking Member, whom I'll give an extra 2 minutes to, I want to thank you personally for your involvement in this MECA situation, because I went there and we had a meeting. Everyone was around the table, and it was so uplifting for the community. It's a poor community, and they really feel that their voices have been heard. And I know we won't stop until we get this all resolved, but I wanted to thank you